Hey, this is Amy with Creative Catapult Coaching, not being very mindful of Megan starting her intro.
Oh, that's okay. This is Megan with Focus Like a Mother, and I was too busy concentrating on making sure I started the recording.
And um, we're laughing because our whole topic is mindfulness, and we've just spent the last 10 minutes or so going all the ways we're being mindful or not mindful in the moment. This
Yes.
is CTRL ALT THINK, conversations with neurodivergent minds, and we are being very divergent in our associations at the moment. So we'll keep them a little bit more focused here.
All right. So, Amy, I'm gonna let you dive into mindfulness because I know you seeded your brain with some ideas before we started the recording.
Yeah, well, and I'll just talk to the image on the screen for a second. We're trying something slightly new. This may be cut. But there's a comic that is often shown while we're in some of our discussions about mindfulness around coaching. I've seen a lot of variations, but it's mindful versus mindful. And mindfulness is so much about being in the moment and kind of taking in what's around you, but often we are dealing with minds full of everything else. And so we're not taking in the moment around us. And this is just kind of a continuation of last week after we talked about brain dumps, using one way to empty our brains so that we're able to focus better. And we thought, oh, hey, why don't we do a whole episode talking about mindfulness?
Yeah. So hold on, keep that screen up there, Amy.
Okay.
So for the version of this that is audio only, in case somebody ended up with a podcast version that's audio only. The image that we're showing on the screen is it looks like two friends walking through a forest. There's some trees and and the sun is out and they each have a thought bubble coming from their head. And the friend on the left, their thought bubble is full of computers and cars and music sounds and dollar signs and paper things and a cupcake and an exclamation point and a dude holding a cell phone and some mail and uh, all kinds of other things.
All sorts of
And
things competing for their attention.
yes, all just like overlapping and completely filling the thought bubble. And then the friend on the right, their thought bubble is an exact representation of the landscape that they're walking in. So there are some trees and the sun, and that is their entire thought bubble, is the current present space that they're in. So that is the visual representation of being mindful, which is full of stuff, and being mindful. So, Amy, I'll let you continue from there.
And I think it's important to note that we all go through phases. We are not mindful, 100 mindful being present in the moment 100% of the time. That is not realistic at all. But there's also this flip side to mindfulness, and especially ADHD with neurodivergence, of being unable to focus. And the thought of, sitting like a monk for 8 hours is so laughable that a lot of us won't even try mindfulness. And it's thrown around in so many ways. Mindfulness is the solution to everything. And, that's like saying, I've got, a cold. Well, that can mean 100 different things. That being said, mindfulness in the context I think that we're talking about is really just being aware of stuff in the present moment. It may or may not be meditation, and we could get technical, and I don't have the recall at the moment for, technical definitions of Buddhist meditation versus mindful.
So I do have a really good app for if you like guided meditations. I'm not going to be able to remember the name of the app at the moment without looking.
The
Um,
calm or breathe or
Insight Timer is the one
insight.
that I like. Calm and Breathe also have um, a lot of them. Insight Timer is a free app with guided meditations and other things. But the key to mindfulness is practice. I've been been working on a research paper for my coaching research, and lots of things about the brain and neuroscience and cognitive based techniques. But the big thing is that the brain has to create the neural pathways to access whatever skill you're doing, which is why the saying practice makes perfect comes around. But mindfulness is no different than any other activity that you're trying to learn and do. So, what I've done is, besides recommending Insight Timer as an awesome app to use if you're looking for something, that one's great for, I'll use it if I can't fall asleep or if I just want like a 7 minute, I just want to take a break or kind of reset if I'm feeling overwhelmed and I'm in a quiet space. But one thing that I've done for my clients and really for anybody um, is I have Focus Like a Mother take a minute cards, and I'm holding one up by the screen now. But on my card, it actually has, right now I've got 10 different ones, but I'm gonna expand. But they're all stress relief strategies, and a lot of them are mindfulness techniques. So the one that I'm holding right now is explains the 5 4 3 2 1 technique. So Amy, you might be familiar with this
I
one,
am.
but this is one that if you practice it enough, it starts to become second nature or almost an unconscious thing to help calm yourself down when you get overwhelmed. So, name 5 things you can see, 4 things you can hear, 3 things you can feel, 2 things you can smell, and 1 thing you can taste in this moment. So, it just brings you back out of the chaos of the overwhelm of going on and back into the present moment. And while I didn't do this one the other day, I had a spontaneous mindfulness moment on Friday. I was sitting in the waiting area of the chiropractor's office and I could hear the birds outside. And so I was just completely, I wasn't scrolling my phone. I wasn't, worried about getting to my next place after the appointment. I was just sitting and listening to the birds. And I realized that my brain was automatically seeking out the different sounds or the different sights or the different textures. Um, but it takes a ton of practice. And I think we as neurodivergent people get frustrated because it is not easy. And our brains are taking in way more information than a neurotypical brain. Um,
And I think that there's some interesting ways to go, well, meditation or mindfulness doesn't have to take 10 minutes. It doesn't even have to take 1 minute. Um, Another thing that our brains do is we have to want to do it. You have to want to develop the skill of mindfulness, or at least develop an interest in having some calm or some relief. But that makes the practice easier. But there are so many different ways to do mindfulness. It doesn't have to be just sitting down, especially if your brain is jumping everywhere. A lot of the mindfulness bits are, where are you directing your attention? People don't always realize that, mindfulness is about directing your brain and your focus to a certain degree. But that doesn't have to mean on thoughts. It can be using your attention to shift and listen to the sounds like your brain was doing, or to, if you're walking, feel the muscles in your feet. What happens when your feet flex and you're walking?
mhm.
Or how does your body feel? There's so many things you could focus on, that there's often something that we can find that is interesting to us.
A common one for neurodivergent people who like coffee is um, really savoring the experience of drinking your coffee. So the warmth of the cup on your hands, the taste of the coffee, and also the feeling, the mouthfeel of the coffee as you drink it. Um, so that's one that for me is kind of like a little ritual coffee or tea, something warm. For me, it's the warmth of the cup on my hand and being able to sit, and that sort of grounds me into the moment.
Yeah. Well, and when I had some notes open, I had wanted to hit on that we don't really think of it as different kinds of brain states, but our brain being busy and occupied is one mind state. We can have kind of a wide focus and take in all the sensory information. And that's an experiencing brain state. We can have a wide experience where, again, we're taking in everything around us, noticing everything, or we can have a very narrow awareness. And one thing that I've done sometimes when I'm trying to find my body is I will squeeze my finger and then just try to concentrate on what does that feel like? I mean, and I know that sounds really dumb, but it's almost because it's so simple, we don't know what that is. What does it feel like when you squeeze your finger?
Mm-hmm.
And you can put all your concentration into that for a couple seconds or pick your own sense. Um, so shifting between a wide state of awareness and a narrow state is different than, just there's a lot to be said too for just closing your eyes and letting your brain wander. But often with brain wandering, we don't have any intention. We're just letting our mind go where it will, which is awesome. I love that for recovery for my brain as well. But mindfulness is using just a little bit of intention to point our attention at a thing
Mm.
and keep bringing our attention back to the thing versus the creative associations that often come with mind wandering.
Mm. I know I do, but do you have anywhere where you like to just sit and look at something? I figured mine was just a neurodivergent quirk of being me, but like some people watch or go sit by, I think you might go sit by the waterfront or the river.
I go and walk at the waterfront, but that's more just because I like being outside or
Okay.
I like the view by the water. I grew up near Puget Sound, which is an inlet of the Pacific Ocean that Seattle is near. And anyway, it's frankly, I'm sit most of the time on my couch and just kind of listen to the stuff around me, which usually includes the not exciting noises of crows and trucks on a loading dock.
It works. So mine is, and I realized as you were talking that it may be my overwhelmed mom brain also taking a break because trying to remember, I know I did this before having kids, but I feel like I make pretty solid habit of it now. Um, Outside of my bedroom window, I planted a garden that this time of year is full of flowers and lots of bees come visit the flowers and stuff. That when I need a break during the day, even for just a couple minutes, I kind of have a habit of going and standing and looking out the window for a couple minutes. And I just don't think about, I'm realizing I don't think about anything else when I'm standing there. I'm just watching and observing what's going on in the garden and appreciating it. Um, and it's almost like a relief from the chaos of, somebody asking for something or I need to get something done or all of the other demands of life. But I'm just realizing now in the moment, like, oh, that's a way that I take a break from my brain. I'm a very visual person, so for me to just get to go look at things, and I like to be outside, but I don't want to stand outside when it's 85 or 90 degrees. So looking out the window suffices.
Yeah, no, it sounds like that. Another thing that I found interesting, and I don't know if we actually said this yet, but um, being grounded is something I've heard for years with yoga and meditation, and I feel really dumb when somebody actually had to tell me, and it was kind of a class of a whole lot of us, that being grounded isn't some weird ethereal state. It's can you feel what you're sitting on?
Hmm.
That's it. Being grounded is not some Zen state that it's like literally being grounded is can you feel the ground? And I felt really dumb that I somehow hadn't actually put that together.
Well, it goes back to that attention piece. Are you able to have enough attention and awareness to really notice all of the sensations of your body pressing into, and whatever you're sitting on or standing on pressing back. And that's the sensation of being grounded, I think.
Yeah, but I still thought I was looking for something else.
Yeah. No, well, and I always thought that being grounded meant that my brain would be perfectly quiet.
Yeah.
But then I'm also terrified of the
Kind of.
brain being perfectly quiet, because what? Yeah, so those occasional thoughts passing through are are perfectly normal. Uh, and the
Yeah.
brain doesn't necessarily go perfectly quiet, you're just directing that attention. So instead of perfectly quiet, the brain is now processing specifically, oh, I can feel the ground, I can feel the carpet between my toes, or I can feel the grass, or I
My
can feel
favorite one
the
is putting
chair.
my face in front of I've got a little air purifier that kicks out a really soft stream of air, and for some reason that is, I've realized, one of my favorite sensations.
Well, that's pretty cool.
But it's kind of odd to sit awkwardly on the floor or stand over it. That being said, I will still do it sometimes. But another thing that I think is important, and with ADHD or some of the other neurodivergent flavors, that we have, short-term memory, we've got 3 to 5 memory slots. Stuff gets bumped out of there really easily, also because we don't have as much of an internal inhibition. Stuff pops into memory that suddenly feels really demanding. And just knowing that our brains don't have as good of breaks, like thought breaks, it's normal, it's okay, and we can still redirect our attention. Um, and that things are just, our brains have more thoughts because we don't, the part of the brain that slows them down and kind of keeps them out of conscious awareness is just not as strong.
Also superpower, because we take all those cool ideas and somehow find ways to combine them. But
Yes, again, it's just interesting to note that they're different places that they show up in. Again, returning to a physical practice, especially if you don't want to sit or find that boring, this is a really another way of being in the moment. It's not
Mhm.
just sitting and only paying attention to your breath and what it feels like in and out of each nostril, which I always found to be a really stifling exercise.
Yeah. Well, that my brain is connecting that to another common thing for neurodivergent brains is the cognitive flexibility or cognitive rigidity. So I feel like I have to follow certain rules. That's my brain needs that rigidity. And so when I first started learning really anything, I feel like there's rules or unwritten rules that I have to do or follow. And meditation and yoga and things like that, it's no different. So it took me a really long time to actually be able to feel comfortable doing some of it, but also to realize that I don't have to do it exactly. th- there's many ways to be mindful, and I didn't have to do it exactly the way this one guided meditation did, or this other yoga practice did. I could be mindful just by sitting in, cross-legged in my bed before I go to sleep, and just taking a deep breath and feeling my hands rest on my knees, or laying flat in the bed, because you can sit any way you
There's
like. And
no
as
right
long
way
as
to do
I'm
it.
aware of, my body sinking into the mattress, that's being directing my attention. But it took me a really long time to realize that I don't have to follow the quote unquote rules um for that mindful awareness, because just directing my attention to something specific is being mindful. I don't have to sit cross-legged on the floor with my hands turned up going for 20 minutes, um if that's not what my brain needs.
speaking of rules, I'm now remembering, it must have been in about second grade. We were introduced to a guided meditation at a school assembly, and I was so frustrated because at the time I didn't realize that I've got almost no internal imagery, so I can't hold and imagine specific things, and then they wanted us to, go through and do this whole guided meditation, and there were so many reasons between imagining it, I couldn't imagine it right and hold it in my head and then pay attention to all the different things they wanted you to imagine or do. So it's funny, I still remember that as I can't do this.
Mm-hmm.
I've got a lot different perspective now, and I also know that there are a lot of other people who, guided meditation is not their thing because they can't see the picture and they're frustrated by it. That has definitely been one of those things. I'm not a big fan of guided meditation because I don't see the pictures or the imagery, and part of my brain is annoyed and frustrated that I can't do it. So this is not relaxing.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. And I think that does it goes with the rules and also just the cognitive differences between all of the different neurodivergent brains. That some people, the guided imagery is the way to go because that's their brain's preference on being able to process things and helps them relax. Whereas other people, following, just breathing along with sounds may be helpful to help them block out some, focus in on one specific thing. I think the key to mindfulness is finding what things work best for you, your lifestyle, and your brain. Like if you're super busy, you're not going to sit down for 20 minutes and do guided imagery, whether that works for you or not, because you just won't have time. So there's a lot of reasons to
Yeah.
try different ones and see what works.
And, I will also say that there are times where I think that, mindfulness is also really hard when I'm tired. So what for a long time, I've been a big fan of sensory deprivation floating. And so even though it doesn't fit mindfulness because I just let my brain go wherever it wants to go, there is being mindful of I'm tired, I'm not thinking well, let me go do this thing that'll help my brain
Mm.
recharge. And so there's a different kind of benefit. So mindfulness, can be at a bigger picture level too. And maybe, and that goes kind of against what we just said of being in the moment, but being aware of that bigger impact for me, is being mindful. It's being able to look and see what I need and what will help me.
Well, it's interesting. So we're at 23 minutes. I
I
just
was
want to
thinking
be
we should probably be
cognizant of the time,
bored.
but my last question for you, my last connection is from mindfulness to self-awareness. What
Ooh,
what connections do you think go there?
that's a good question, and my brain is super distracted because something just shifted behind me. Um, so there might have been some self-awareness there. But I think mindfulness and self-awareness are probably pretty closely related.
Well, when you mentioned going to the doing sensory deprivation floating, if I can get all the words out, um, being
Floating, I just
aware,
call it floating. It's
but
usually.
being aware that you just need to be able to let your brain go, and going and floating is going to help that. I was almost hearing that the the more you practice mindfulness, the more self-awareness you might generate. How does that sound?
That's probably a fair statement, and that maybe if you've got some self-awareness, you also have more mindfulness than you might have given yourself credit for.
Hmm. Well,
And
with
that
that,
this is a practice, and it's not going to be perfect, and these are all broad brush strokes,
mhm.
and we're growing as we talk about it.
Well, and I think that that's a good spot to kind of wrap up because we've left ourselves another open thread of topic on self-awareness then for another time. So, with that, I am Megan with Focus Like a Mother,
And I'm Amy with Creative Catapult Coaching.
and this is the Control Alt Think podcast, Conversations with Neurodivergent Minds, and we will see everybody next time. Bye.
Take care.